update. Project working on right now is the fuel tank placement. Going to get that knocked out and then start working on the actual fuel lines and all the installation for the fuel tank. In that rear cargo compartment area, there's a gap between the fuel tank and the rear, which is in most of the Tornados I've looked at is pretty much just unused space. What I did is used a piece of cardboard and I put a couple of pieces of angle in there, figured out how to use some Adel clamps to make a tray or a shelf, a vertical tray that will fit. This was my first attempt. It worked out pretty good. I'm going to trim that down a little bit so it's not as bulky on the sides. What we'll have back here in that back compartment is the hoses for the fuel. Will come along the bottom edge here on the right hand side and up underneath the tank, and then it will come up along the back side. The goal will be to put the gascolator there, as well as the filter, the in filter that goes before the fuel pump, and then the other filter that goes on the other side of the fuel pump. And then the fuel lines will run out the bottom and it will go up that left side and then up through the top into the engine through that top tray. The kit came with what is referred to as the 15-gallon fuel tank. And prior to installing everything and getting all the hoses and everything completely connected for the system, I decided I was going to calibrate and make sure that I knew exactly how much fuel would go in the tank. With each gallon, as I filled up the tank, I would put the tape in to mark the fuel line, the top where it was with the nose wheel down. Then I would rotate the tail down and the nose up, and I would also just make a check of that. On the side, the back tape is the mark that I made for the angle of where it was on the back of the tank when it was tilted. On the front, it was actually pretty interesting. Each tilt was basically about an inch. That the painter's tape is an inch, and so as I tilted it back down, the line would actually move down to the bottom of the tape. When I put the nose wheel back on the ground, the fuel level would level out the top of the tank. And you can see the level right now is showing. I'll shake it a little bit so you can see the water move. The dark line inside the tank is at 9 gallons, so it's right at the top of the blue tape, which is where I marked for 9 gallons. And what I was explaining is as it tilts up with, like, simulating if the engine was on and you were feeling it with nobody in the airplane, have a little bit of weight on the back, you can see that that line has now shifted to the bottom of the blue tape mark. And so when I make this, I'll make a mark on here so that it's pretty easy to see the 5, probably the 5 to the 10, the 5 and 10 gallon marks, and then I'll have all the other gallon marks in there as well. Checking the operation of the fuel shutoff valves on both sides. Those are working excellent. They turn the fuel on and off, which will allow me to isolate the system when I want to turn it off, and also allow me to change and clean the 2 fuel filters, 1 for each line. I also have tested the speed of drain. So just with gravity through the right-hand side, it takes about 1 minute and 20 seconds for 1 gallon to drain out of the tank just with normal gravity. So knowing the gravity drain time, knowing that my marks are all correct, I'll go through and mark permanently on the tank the indicators for each level, and I'm going to drain it down to about 2 gallons, and then I'm going to test to see how much is actually left over and usable in the tank. The project currently working on is the rear cargo compartment fiberglass panels. They fit nearly perfectly. Reached back to use a technique that I've used other places. It's good having this Lexan scrap pieces that are just that came with the kit. So basically I just laid a piece up there, trimmed it so it fit approximately, drilled the holes so it would sit down, and then marked center following the drawings. Drilled the holes with number 40 and Clecos, and then pulled it off, placed the fiberglass panel in place, laid the clear Lexan back on top, and Clecoed it in place, except for the left-hand side, looking at it from the picture, and then just match drilled those holes along the side. The left and right-hand rear cargo and fuel bay area panels are installed. They're both fiberglass. This is a newer model. It doesn't have the hard angle up on top underneath the engine. It's a lot smoother, and it makes that whole back panel the same shape and size. The right-hand side that we're looking at right now is Clecoed in place. That will be removable. Pull that off and then install nut plates on the left-hand side. Those nut plates along the front, the side, and then along the top. To make this piece removable, I wanted the firewall to be able to be securely attached to the frame so that there's no shifting or moving. And the instructions call for a spacer, and it actually says to use washers. And so washers are supplied with the kit, and I had a bag full of them, and unfortunately it's a pain to try to get the washers in there. And I looked at this and I was like, man, if I've got to pull this on and off and do different things. So what I did is I used a piece of scrap 0.6 or 0.062 material, and I basically cut out these little wedges. And what I've done is I've placed them on the fiberglass where they'll be attached into the frame. And now what I'll do is I'll actually trace those out, and I'll trim those so that the fiberglass will slide next to those and be flush against the frame, but not be attached here. And so the firewall will stay attached underneath the engine with rivets, so these will be riveted, and then the skin will slide underneath those. There should be enough gap to slide underneath. The top firewall plate is in place with the spacers, and it worked really well pulling the fiberglass out, and now we're going to try putting it back in to see how that works out. Went in pretty easy, wasn't super bad. Everything lined up really nice. Have a good seam there. There's a little bit of a gap up there, but that's just the fiberglass. It's not exactly straight. But ultimately, that'll allow me to pull this on and off as needed for inspections and for work in the back area. I've been working on the rear access panel, fiberglass parts. So the right-hand panel is going to be removable, and so to make that happen I needed to install nut plates, and I've got the bottom side done, and I'm currently working on the top side. I found what worked well with these to make sure that my alignment is perfect is I took the number 40 holes that were drilled for the Clecos, and I drilled those up to a 1136 size bit, and then I used the 832 screws, and I screwed those into the nut plates. So you'll see these, there's the screw, and once those are screwed on, I flip over this way and I drill the holes through the nut plate guide holes, because I've got these screwed down snug so they don't spin. And all the holes have been drilled, The rivets I'll be using are number 40 rivets that are flathead and tapered. I used this countersink bit to just countersink a little bit of those holes so that when the rivets go in, they will sit flush and allow that to be screwed up tight against the panel. This is the end of a 2-week build trip. A lot of good progress. I'm happy with where I'm at.